This podcast is entertainment, not financial, tax, or legal advice. Views expressed represent statements of the speaker in their individual capacity, do not represent the views of Unchained, and should not be considered investment advice. Speakers often have personal, family, or business connections to Unchained, which may include direct financial benefits. Please see our disclosure at unchained.com/podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Bitcoin Frontier podcast. I am your host, Trey Sellers, and I'm here with the legendary Marty Bent. Today we're going to cover how Marty uses AI in his various projects and how Bitcoin fits into this whole crazy AI world. Marty, great to have you on.
Trey, you were too kind.
Yes.
Legendary
is
word.
It is absolutely apt. I've been listening to that sweet voice for a very long time. And we've had the pleasure of recording up in New York a little bit earlier.
Some beers and pubcake.
And so now we've flipped the script here. And so look, I've been super fascinated by all of the AI stuff that's been going on. And so I really want to get into what you are doing to use AI, the tools that are out there, what kind of projects you're working on there. But like, before we get into that, can you just give everybody an overview of what balls do you have in the air right now? Because it feels like you are working on so many different things, and we just need an inventory. What are the different things that you are working on? What are the projects? What are the companies that you work with? Like, what is the landscape of Marty Bent?
Yeah, it's a wide aperture, that's for sure. Like I was telling you, the number one on the mind right now, third child is coming in 20 days, so building a family, number one. Then obviously the media. So I've been doing TFTC for 8 years now. I think the podcast turns 8 in a month. The newsletter turned 8 in June. And so I'm doing that. That's the bread and butter. It's what got me where I am, the content, writing and talking about Bitcoin. And then obviously beyond that, managing partner at 1031. So like I was telling you, I've been on calls all day since 11, all 1031 related. So investing in the space, trying to support the companies, building out critical Bitcoin infrastructure, obviously Unchained being one of those companies that we support. And then I sit on the board of a couple companies in our portfolio. I've, along the way, started a mining company, self-mine. So I think as it pertains to the Bitcoin businesses, the ones that I think I'm most intimately knowledgeable about and understand the most is the mining businesses. So yeah, media, investing, mining being a core focus of mine. And so a lot of different balls, but they all blend together. It's funny. I was at the proto launch of their rig miner last week in Georgia, and it was the most commonly asked question by everybody there. It's like, how do you divide your time between all these different things you're doing? And it all blends together. Like the media is top of funnel for 1031 aways. 1031 is it's probably where I spend most of my time. But I think the media 8 years in has become muscle memory for me on the content production side, where that's writing or doing podcasts. And the company's got to a point where I've been able to hire like an incredible team that really makes sure that the business doesn't really need me to be doing the day-to-day monotonous back-end stuff that I did by myself for many years.
Yeah, as I said, I've been a listener of TFTC for a very long time, and I've definitely seen the show evolve over the years and how you guys approach it. I mean, the conversations are kind of the same, not in a bad way, but just, you know, it's a great riff back and forth and camaraderie that you and Matt have. But you know, the way that you've approached the production of the show, the various outlets that are coming off of that main branch have definitely blossomed right over the years. And it's been a lot of fun to watch the progress of the show itself. And like, I don't know, maybe just walk us through, like, what does that evolution look like? How have you thought about like taking the show in different directions, and then like maybe start to bring in the AI aspect of this, and how do you formulate your process around using AI and building the different businesses and media outlets and that kind of thing that you've got going on?
Yeah. And so the evolution of the product, the media product, right? For the longest time, it was just the newsletter and the podcast, RSS, audio only. I think we did audio only up until COVID. And so when COVID hit, that's when like Zoom calls and all that stuff started being necessary. The podcast up until COVID was in person only. You'd have to come to my studio apartment in Brooklyn, New York, and we record in my living room / bedroom, and typically have some drinks. But COVID threw a wrench in that, and the product evolved in good ways and not necessarily bad. But I do miss like predominant in-person interviews. But I think the one thing about video is that it widens the potential guests that you can have on the show, which is, I think, an overall net positive. But with like video, I was never like a YouTube guru or anything like that. So we would just post the Zoom video outputs on YouTube, and really never, for the first 3 years we were putting stuff on YouTube, like really never thought to cater the video content on YouTube to YouTube's algorithm, which is a beast. And so I think over the last 2 years, I think what you're alluding to is like we've really leaned into the production value on the video specifically, for better or for worse, because of YouTube's algorithm to extend the distribution and grow the audience there. And that led to me like hiring somebody who actually understands YouTube and the algorithm and how to position things and how to create 30-second sort of previews that hook people and get you fed into the algo because your retention's high. So I guess
it's amazing how the different platforms have different algorithms, how there's like almost entirely different approach that you've got to have to YouTube versus X versus any of the other platforms that are out there. And like it feels like from the outside, somebody who doesn't focus a lot of time on creating that type of content across all of these different platforms, that it's like a full-time job just to adapt the different pieces of content that you've got out there, or the different media mechanisms to the different platforms.
Yeah. And we've got 3 people who do that pretty much, like a combination of part-time and full-time, Logan, Ed, and Brandon on our team. And so yeah, that's like, I guess, how the content's evolved. The newsletter has been pretty consistent. We've changed from MailChimp to Ghost like 6 years ago, and that's the only big difference there. But it's just writing. And I like to write because it keeps me sharp in terms of being able to articulate my thoughts. I think writing is incredibly powerful in that sense. Like, I don't think you truly know what you think you know until you try to write it down. And so writing for me is
100%
a way to do that. And as I'm sort of following what's going on in the industry, whether it's from the macros perspective, what's happening with new developments on the technical side of Bitcoin, like I read a lot about all of it. And then my job at the newsletter is like, all right, I need to write down what I think I know and try to express that to the reader. So newsletter's been pretty vanilla. But then I think what you have been catching on to, I like to, well, take a step back first. Number one, the brand has gone through a rebrand. It went through a rebrand like 5 years ago too, which we started out from Tales from the Crypt. I didn't name it. Lewis from Barstool, who was the guy who convinced me to start the podcast, he named it Tales from the Crypt. It was in 2017 during the ICO bubble. It just seemed like a very apt, catchy name at the time, and it worked out well. Got a pretty good audience right out of the gate. But combination of me being viscerally and gutturally sort of against crypto as a word, and just even having crypt allude to crypto made me want to change the name. And then also HBO owns the rights to Tales from the Crypt, and we started making revenue, and I did not want HBO to come after me for IP infringement. And so luckily, Tales from the Crypt, TFTC, sitting there thinking, what is our brand really about? What string of words that begin with TFTC can I force into this acronym? And Truth for the Commoner became what I landed on. And I think it's very, very descriptive of what we're trying to do with the brand Truth in the digital age. I think Bitcoin is one of the purest manifestations of truth in this digital age, filled with a bunch of noise. And I think it also sort of aligned with my philosophy behind the media brand, which is obviously we're Bitcoin first, Bitcoin at our core, but I don't want to be pigeonholed to just doing Bitcoin content. I think not only would I get sick of just doing Bitcoin only content, but I like to view TFTC as a brand, as a Trojan horse to get people into Bitcoin. That is why our logo is a Trojan horse. So talking about subjects that are tangential but somewhat related to Bitcoin, whether that's macro, privacy, energy, talk with people who know nothing about Bitcoin, but they have interesting thoughts and expertise in tangential sort of verticals, and just have a conversation about that, and lightly either bring up Bitcoin or don't even bring Bitcoin up, but leave them with the thought like, oh, I just went on a Bitcoin podcast. Didn't talk about Bitcoin, but hopefully that guy was pretty interesting and on top of things. And if I could have a good conversation with him about this stuff, maybe it's worthwhile looking into Bitcoin. And similarly, had that effect with the audience that comes for a guest that has nothing to do with Bitcoin. They're like, oh, hopefully, I like to think the host was interesting on this certain subject. Maybe what he has to say on Bitcoin is interesting as well. So that's like the brand evolution and the different forms of the product that we've had. But I'm sure you've noticed, we've been leaning into AI in many different ways. And so, like, I think this could be a long conversation.
How did it start? Did you start by using ChatGPT, for example, to just like kind of help you write the newsletter, or like what was the? I know from the history of listening to you and Matt talk that you are very much like to tinker and play with, new tools and tech, especially around Bitcoin. But this also has caught your eye. Like, how did it worm its way in?
I think it's ChatGPT, Claude. I'm trying to think like the first one, Perplexity. I think like Perplexity was like the first time I was like, okay, this stuff is something here. And it was literally just research for. I've never used AI to write my section of the newsletter. We'll get into a section of the newsletter that is AI generated, but for Marty's Bent, like, again, going back to what I said earlier, like, how do you know what you know unless you write it down and can articulate it? Like, so I've always been a purist in that sense. It's more of a selfish, like, practice. Like, I need to be sharp and make sure I know what I know. So I can't allocate writing to artificial intelligence. But I did use AI via Perplexity in their deep research models that they had like a year ago to help me do research, particularly on like Fed data and economic data. Just so, because like historically, I'm literally jumping from Fred to the BLS to a bunch of other websites just to try to scrape data, and was able to just like give a prompt like, hey, I'm looking for non-farm payroll jobs numbers, unemployment percentage, what's the monetary base, like I want all this information, like what are the delinquency rates, and like boom, like, oh crap, like it spit it out in 5 minutes and I don't have to go searching. So at first foray was as a research assistant, and that was like a year ago, and I think the more I leaned into that and the more the models progressed, it just became glaringly obvious, like, holy crap, this stuff can be an extreme accelerant to what you're trying to do on the operations side of things. And so, and then I also started falling down like the rabbit hole of AI podcast and YouTube channels, and not only to learn for the business, but like obviously an investing hat on now, you hear all this talk about how these models and these AI tools are going to be extremely disruptive to businesses. And so like literally from an investor, if I'm doing my fiduciary duty to ensure that I'm on top of this, to make sure that we're investing in the right companies and giving them the right advice as it pertains to this this overarching theme of AI, I've got to get my hands dirty. And so I got my hands really dirty, and still am to this day. And just really came to the conclusion that there are ways that you can integrate this. And I think from the TFTC perspective, it happens on the back end of the business, on the processy side, and then on the front end on a creative output side as well.
What are the things that you found that the tools do really well? And what are some of the limitations that you found as you've started to integrate these into your processes?
It's the things they do really well. We'll start with the things they do really bad. They do really bad if you don't give them good prompts and instructions. So I think that's the first thing we realized as a team at TFTC. And I'll just give you one example. So the newsletter, going back to the newsletter, like I said, Marty's Bent, I write by hand to help myself, but we have a second section. And basically what the second section is, it's like a section of a podcast we've recently posted, like a succinct description of a particular section that we think was really good that people should dive into with a quote from the guest. And so what we do, we've basically, here's an example of like a AI somewhat agentic workflow that we've integrated. So we'll take the audio file from a podcast, we'll drop it in Dropbox, and that triggers an event. We use N8N flows to sort of communicate across these apps. Put the audio file in Dropbox. It's like, all right, spit that to a transcription. AI, get a transcription. Then we have Claude like prompt that we've been iterating probably at this point for like 8 months. I think it's like 15 pages long. And it'll feed the podcast transcription in there. And then
Prompt is 15 pages long?
Yes. And so that's what like you have to like give these models, at least at this point, who knows, maybe it'll change in the future as they continue to advance, but just to get the output that we feel comfortable with and we're confident doesn't have any of the slop and hallucinations, like we have to be very specific with how we prompt Claude, and then it'll spit out like 5 different sections, summaries, quotes, and then we'll pick one, and then the N8M flow will go to Ghost and create a new post for the newsletter and add that section. And so when I go to write the Bent, the podcast sort of bone framework is there with that section added, so we don't have to think about it. It's like literally put the audio file in, it triggers all those events. The only man in the middle sort of intervention is like pick one of the sections, one of the outputs that they spit out, and like boom, it goes into the newsletter. So that's like back-end processy. Probably saves, I mean, if we had to write that.
How were you doing that before? Or were you not even doing that?
We weren't even doing it. So it was like it was an example of something that we weren't doing before because it'd be too time consuming and annoying. Right. That is now possible, like value add for people reading the newsletter because we can automate it. So that's one example on the back end. We use like, that's the other thing too. Like a lot of these services, like Adobe Premiere, I'm sure Jose will put this in Adobe Premiere. They have really good like AI sound tools that'll take out background noise and ums and stuff like that. So we use that. We have a AI clipping service that we use that's connected to our YouTube API. So whenever we put up a YouTube video, I just pulled directly from our YouTube API into this AI software, Opus Clips, and we go and we have a number of different clips that we can pull from the episode, immediately put across social.
Have you found that actually works very well?
It's getting better. It's getting certainly way better than it was last year around this time when we started using it. But there is still some man in the middle intervention, but I mean, it's worth it in the sense that
you can't just put it out there without looking at it, right? Like you have to look at it and make sure that it is sensical.
Yeah.
You know,
that definitely have to do that, but it's still demonstrably faster, more efficient than going into like a raw video file and trying to clip something out, like starting from scratch. So so there's all back-end processes, and then front end, which is probably the most exciting to the audience, considering that's the most visible output, is like these AI generated videos that we've been leaning into, which have been really fun to make.
Yeah. So before we get into that, one more kind of question on your process, right? Which is, how do you approach like learning these new tools, finding out about what is out there? Is it just that, oh, I've got this problem and I'm trying to figure out how to automate it, and so I'm gonna go into one of the other models and figure out if there's some tool that's already out there? Are you like, how do you think about, what's the framework that you use to understand how to use AI in an appropriate way? Or is it more like monkey like where you're just hitting buttons until something works?
No, there's multiple things here. I mean, with GPT-5, it's really solved a lot of the problems because GPT-5 will read the context of your prompt and understand what model to feed it to, whether it's 5.0 or what the equivalent to 4.0, 3, whatever it was. Like the 4.0 was really good for deep research and or no, not deep research, like quick responses. And then you had I think 3.0, which was good for deep research. And up until GPT-5, you had to basically know which model that GPT was offering that was good at any particular skill. What was good at research? What's good at sort of quick responses and context. But even taking a step back, like you just ask it how to use it. It's like, hey, I'm trying to do this. So there's 2 examples here. So another thing, we built Opportunity Cost, the browser extension. I basically built the MVP prototype of Opportunity Cost by myself, and basically a combination of GPT, deep research, starting like, hey, I want to create a browser extension that is privacy preserving. I don't want to take anybody's data, but essentially what I want to do is convert the prices on a web page from fiat currency to Bitcoin. And sort of the deep research is like, all right, here's what you need to do. Here's sort of what the product should look like. Here's like a product roadmap. And then I went into another GPT model. I forget one. I was like, all right, you're a product manager. Here's what I want to build. Like, tell me what I need to do to actually get this built. It did that. And then it's basically you need to go to Replit or some other sort of app making service and build it there, or Cursor, whatever it may be. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to use Replit. Like, tell me what I need to tell Replit to actually build this. And it like gave me the prompts that I then fed to Replit, which is ultimately what I built the prototype with. And then obviously it wasn't perfect. It wasn't like a one-shot prompt, but it was good enough to set me on my way to have a good base to build from. And then over the course of a few hours on Replit, I built the Firefox and Chrome extensions, just iterating with agents. But it's like storyboard or ideate in a more general model. You can get more specific as you're getting closer to like having a product roadmap and a feature set that you want to build, asking it like, all right, here's the feature set. Give me the prompt to feed to this specific model to get the output. And along the way, like teaching yourself how to use the models by asking the models, like, how can I best use you? Like, what do I need to tell you to get the best response?
Yeah, that's definitely how I've kind of going around it. Like, it's helpful to have the context of if you're trying to build a product like Opportunity Cost, which is awesome. If anybody who's listening and watching, go download this extension, install it. It's really, really cool. It works very, very well, by the way, Marty. It like,
it's very lightweight. That was one of the things. I was like, I don't want this to take up too much data. It's got to work. It's got to be lightweight.
It's very lightweight, and for the most part, like, it will format things in a way that doesn't clutter the screen or, just make it look like a garbled mess. Like I've logged into my bank account and looked there, and you can see like my checking account, and it just formats it really nicely with sats sitting right next to it, which I love. But yeah, what I've found is like, it's definitely helpful if you already understand like what should the macro process of, let's say, building an app mean, meaning like, oh, I need a product manager, as you mentioned, to go through the steps that are kind of proven to yield a good process output that can then be built by an engineer and then go through that. So if you don't have that framework, you're probably going to spend a little bit more time asking the model, if you are taking that tack, to show you like, well, what should that process actually be, right? And then to your point, like, it can help you to understand how to think about a problem that then you can take into a new model or a new prompt, new screen, new chat window, and start from that newfound like base level knowledge that you've gained from yourself. And then you can kind of even just download that output and feed it in to the new one and say, here, start from here, right?
Yeah. And then if you want to sort of A/B test things, like you can just you can say, all right, GPT, I want this, I need prompts for Replit, Cursor, and Claude Code. And then you put it in the 3 of those and you see what gets the best output. And then you can take it a step further. And I've seen people do this. I haven't gone this far yet, but I'm sure I will at some point. You get the outputs from those 3 individual models, and then you pit them against each other. You're like, hey, here's what Replit gave me, Claude Code. Like, it seems better than what you did. Can you do better than this? And you sort of have them compete, and cream rises to the top. It's crazy what you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. While we're on the subject of opportunity cost, where do you see that going? You've launched like kind of, 1.0 type product. Are you going to continue to invest in that and build it out? Is it going to be somewhat monetized at some point? Or are you going into like an actual, iOS app or something like that? Like what's the roadmap for opportunity cost?
Yeah, the extension will never monetize. It'll always be MIT licensed open source because I don't want the risk of dealing with browser extensions. As we both know, being in this industry, browser extensions are notoriously unsafe. And so for the browser extension, it was literally just like a weekend project. Like, I want to be able to view the price of things in Bitcoin as I browse the internet on my laptop. And I built it as like a scratch my own itch thing. And then I downloaded it, sideloaded it myself. I was like, this is really valuable. I think other Bitcoiners will get value out of this. So let's build it. And let's build it in a way where it's open source. So it's like we have many eyes on the code base, and it's very obvious what we're doing. So like everything happens on the client side. The only external sort of pinging from opportunity cost is like literally pinging our caching database, which has the Bitcoin price. Like, we don't know anything that's happening on your page. We don't know what websites you're going to. We don't know what pages you're looking at. The only interaction we have with anybody who downloads opportunity cost is just sending Bitcoin price data every 5 minutes. And so in terms of the extension, no, not going to monetize it. Like, we'll keep iterating and adding more cross pairs and making sure that any bugs are fixed. But I do think there is something there that's valuable. We are working on a mobile app that will, we're still trying to figure it out. But that's the beauty of it, is like, it cost me probably $20 to get the prototype, and then I had a developer build it out. It probably cost me, the company, another $5,000. So like, it was relatively cheap to do. It's fun. I think people are liking it. It's got thousands of downloads, and I think it's valuable. And so that's the beauty of these tools too. It's just like, they give you the flexibility to do things for relatively cheap. And then I think when it comes to opportunity cost and are we going to monetize it as a business, I think we're just like open to seeing where the market takes us and continue tinkering. And if we stumble into something monetizable, lean into it then. But it's, the luxury is that it's so cheap to make that you don't really have to focus on that. The media business is very profitable, and I think it's just a cool thing for us to do from a brand building perspective.
Yeah, it's such a great example of something that you probably wouldn't have done had it not been for these tools, these AI tools being available to you, either because you didn't have the time or it would have cost too much and you wouldn't have gotten like any kind of return. But the fact that you can just put out a prototype that's working over a weekend and then spend a total of $5,000, as you're saying, to like get something out there that's very well made and works very well in the span of probably just a couple of weeks is pretty incredible. And we are seeing other things that you're working on as well that are probably an even better example of that, which are these videos that you're referring to. The first one that you did, the first one that I saw at least, was a story about the creature from Jekyll Island, the Federal Reserve. And it's about, 2.5 minutes long, and just so well done from a story arc perspective and a narrative perspective to kind of hit people over the head with a moving message. And I think that, one of the things that Bitcoin has been missing, in my own personal opinion, is a cultural aspect of explaining the value proposition of what it can do for the world. You know, like if you look at Hollywood, if you look at the way movies and TV and whatever are made, there are these messages that are embedded in there, but they are built into the stories and the characters that are created as part of those movies and TV shows. And up until this point, like none of that has been really embedded in terms of like the value proposition of Bitcoin or Bitcoin being embedded into media and movies and TV and all of that. But now all of a sudden, we plebs have tools at our disposal that can make something that looks like it came out of Hollywood and tell a fascinating story with the message that we want to get out to the world, and that can be very widely shared. And I think this is such an awesome endeavor that you guys have gone on. So like, give me the full story on that. How did you think about this? What's the process for coming up with the actual narrative that you are that you're putting out there? How are you storyboarding this out? How are you scripting it? What tools are you using? Like, give me the whole thing.
So like the beginning, I think this really ties into everything we've been doing on the AI front. Is again, when I was falling down that rabbit hole of people talking about AI, particularly the rabbit hole of people building with AI. It was crazy seeing what people were building. And you can go on YouTube and find like Greg Eisenberg, the startup podcast, I think it's called. Is it the startup? Whatever. Greg Eisenberg's his name. He runs a YouTube, very popular. But on top of AI, there's very good signal, an amount of noise too that comes with it, but you have to be able to sift through that. But point being is like his videos get 400,000, 500,000, 600,000 views. I think he does one a week. And I think one of the points one of his guests was making, and when I was falling down that particular rabbit hole of like a YouTube AI content, YouTube channel AI content, is like one of his guests just said flippantly, like, yeah, you're getting like hundreds of thousands of views, but very few people actually take the advice and go incorporate it in what they're doing. So it's like there's a ton of interest in this space, a lot of people excited about it, but the point that this particular guest made was like very few people are actually going to take action. And I took umbrage to that. I was like, I'm not going to be one of those people that just like consumes this and is following it and is watching people build stuff and doesn't do something. And so at that point, like we had incorporated stuff on the back end of the company, opportunity cost has been built, but it really drove me. Like the next Monday, we have like a weekly catch up. I have a weekly catch up with Ed, my head of growth, who also is like really the director and lead producer in a lot of these AI generated videos. I was like, dude, we got to make an AI generated video. I don't care how good or bad it is. Like you just need to get your hands dirty with Google Veo 3. And we need to begin experimenting with this because I think it could be extremely powerful. And like up to that point, to your point, like I agree. Like it was very obvious to me, like if this video generation is as good as it is, like the only thing I see people using it for is like stupid stuff that it's like funny and it's cool and it looks real and it seems like we're past the
a Yeti doing a vlog,
yeah,
teaching you how to ice fish.
Yeah, it's all really cool and it's
great.
It's like
it's awesome.
It's like I'm like we have these stories. And it's funny. I did a Noster vlog yesterday where I've been talking about these themes and like these specific like stories that we're telling via these 2 to 2.5 minute formats with the Veo 3 generations for 8 years, and like in the long form hour, 2 hour, 3 hour podcasts, I've talked about many of the. I've talked about the creature from Jackal Island. I've talked about 1971, WTF happened in 1971. I've talked about the Roman Empire falling, the West African slave trade. So like multiple times throughout the years, and nothing has been.
I think we're getting a preview of what's coming down the pipe.
Well, no. So that's what so the one that you saw was our third video. So when I sent Ed out, I was like, I don't care how good or bad it is. Like we need to mess with this. So the first one we did was the Roman Empire and how the the dilution of the silver and the denarii, the gold and the denarii, and the replacement of copper over time contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire. And that was one of those. We experiment with the selfie video sort of style, and that was very well received. It was cool. It wasn't perfect, had its rough edges and incontinuity, points of incontinuity where it was like, this is like obviously AI generated and there's some things that are happening that don't make any sense, but it's good enough and people liked it. The second one we did was the West African slave trade, how shell money contributed and exacerbated to that atrocity, and that was better, but we still did the selfie. And then what you saw first, the creature from Jackal Island, that was like the one that went super viral. That was our third video. And we switched up sort of the format and the styling of that one. And then the last one, which we dropped yesterday, was basically what's happened in the U.S. since Nixon ripped us off the gold standard. And that one's going
also so good. Like the story and the narrative arc of that tight 2.5 minute, almost feels like a movie trailer, so to speak, but just has such a tight message embedded in great graphics, good conversations and one-liners and all of this. Like, it looks so well done. And I really think that this has and will have such a great impact on our ability as Bitcoiners, as people who care about, changing the world for the better as we see it, to be able to get that message out in a way that's easily digestible, that's moving, that's emotional, that hits people beyond just like the cognition that you get when you're reading a 50-page PDF or a book about Bitcoin. There's nothing wrong with that, but culture is shaped by media and visually through these other mediums, and having these tools available and then great storytellers to put these types of narratives together is just so powerful.
Yeah, it really is. And we don't have to reinvent the wheel either. So if like the creature from Jackal Island, we literally took a PDF and of the book and like fed it to a model. We're like, hey, we're looking to make a 2.5 minute short film on this book. Can you pull like the key parts of the book that are most important to express to the audience, and like put out a storyboard framework for scenes? And then from there, once you're okay with the storyboard, it's like, all right, let's get a script that would fit into this. You get the script, and then the script's never perfect, so there's a lot of sort of human intervention in really tidying up the script. So a lot of that happens in Claude. I think we use Claude to that part of the process. And then similarly, like I did with opportunity costs, we go, okay, Claude, we're going to use Google Veo 3 to try to generate this short film. Can you help us with the prompt? And Alpha, for all the Bitcoin Frontier listeners right now, Google Veo 3 we found really likes prompts in JSON format. So like rendering everything down to JSON.
I've been seeing that, yeah.
To give it very very specific instructions that are readable to the models like JSON. So we've been doing that. And then from there, it's a lot of trial and error, like trying to get consistency and continuity. And there's some hacks to get more continuity. Like I think the short film / advertisement that we released yesterday was the most continuity I've seen in anything we've produced, which I was stoked to see.
Yeah, the elderly man on the rocking chair with the plaid shirt talking to his grandson. I mean, it looked like the same character the entire way through, which I have played around with some of this video generation stuff, and it is very difficult to get that continuity, especially when you're talking about people and the features that they have. And we as actual humans are very, very well versed at discerning differences in the way that people look, and it's very easy to recognize if somebody does not look the same, or feel like, oh, that's a different person or whatever. And the AI models, it really is kind of probability based and whatever, so it's difficult to get that continuity, but sounds like you guys have figured out a way to get that a little bit more consistently.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to the JSON descriptions, similar to the 15-page prompt we have for the newsletter section. I think from what I understand, like the extent of my involvement in the production of these videos is like the first storyboarding. Like I'm sort of the top down. All right, let's tell the fall of the Roman Empire and how the debasement of denarii contributed to that. All right, let's tell the how the shell money contributed to the West African slave trade. And I was like, all right, let's do the Fed, Creature from Jekyll Island. And this one, I was like, all right, 1971, taking off the gold standard. I wanted to focus, like I want part of the core to be the disintegration of the nuclear family. And my guys take it from there and really do an incredible job. And I think that's another important thing. It's not just a bunch of unexperienced novices doing this. Like Ed is a video editor, has been for a long time. He was making a lot of viral videos during the Wall Street Bets days for a bunch of like stock trading discords and X accounts, and then Elijah Finley, who we brought in for the West African slave trade video, and the most recent video we did. He's 19 years old. He's a Zoomer, number one, but he's got a lot of experience with legit film production and editing. So I think
it kind of goes back to what I was saying before. Like if you already have a framework and understanding of the meta behind what you want to accomplish, in this case, cinematography and filmmaking and whatever, like you're definitely still at an advantage. And then you can use these tools to be able to create like amazing video for a fraction of the cost and a fraction of the time, right?
And that's why I think that's I don't think it's a competition, but I think that's why ours has been so good, is because we have two guys in particular who really understand video production, cinematography, scene setting, scripts, something that I've taken a film and lit class before, but never gotten that far and would not be able to do that by myself.
Yeah, like I said, I've been playing around with this kind of thing, and I made one little short thing that I posted out there, and it looks okay, but it's like a 30-second clip, and I know nothing about, storyboarding and creating these types of narrative arcs and the cinematography and all of that. So I'm like kind of fully relying on the AI guide there and the expertise that's built into those models to be able to come up with that, which makes it much more difficult for me, at least. But I'm trying to learn this and understand it, just because it is such a powerful tool.
Yeah. And that's what the more you use it, the easier it gets. And again, you can like ask it, like, teach me how to use you. And it'll point you in the right direction. But no, to the broader point, like the cultural point too, like it's one thing, the first 16 years of Bitcoiners been incredibly good at. Bitstein made this very clear in his 2019 BitBlock Boom presentation. Like, we're very good at memeing. I think we all recognize that we're in an info war and a mimetic warfare, if you will. And whether people outside of Bitcoin want to recognize it or not, I think it's objectively true that Bitcoiners are incredibly talented when it comes to distilling complex topics into funny, relatable memes that can be shared and go viral. And I think the emergence of this AI generated video technology is the most potent meme technology that we've ever had. Like, there's a bunch of stories that we want to tell, that we have told already, the first 4, and we have a list of at least 20 to 30 more that we could easily dive into and just spend a week at a time.
Yeah, it's endless, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the way that I came up with the idea for the one that I created was, okay, well, I'm going to take this meme that is already out there that people already recognize and just turn it into a real guy who's, saying stupid stuff about Bitcoin. The meme with the guy in the Patagonia vest who's, just heard about Bitcoin and he's here to fix it, right? And it works pretty well when you're starting from that spot where people already understand the meta message that meme is meant to be conveying there, right?
Yeah, and that's like, so the sort of tack that we're taking is, again, leaning into the Trojan horse. Like, that's one thing. Again, I've been trying to do a TFTC, particularly since the rebrand, is like Trojan horse Bitcoin and everything. And so I think the sort of niche storytelling subsection we find ourselves in, and I think we're going to swim in for a while, is just talk about these broad systemic issues that people recognize. And then at the very, like, we don't mention Bitcoin. I got yelled at today for not mentioning Bitcoin in the most recent video, but like, it's literally just focus on broad societal issues, like point out here are the problems, and it's the money that is causing the problem. And then at the very end, like, you should price your life in Bitcoin. Like, think about Bitcoin. And it's funny when a lot of the comments, not a lot, like a very small minority, but there's a ton of people like quote tweeting like, "Oh, I love this video, incredible message. Don't agree with the Bitcoin stuff though." And it's like, all right, I got one touch with you.
Yeah, exactly. It takes what, 7 or 8?
Yeah, like they can't deny that the content's good. They have to share it. And they'll retweet it, and then they'll quote tweet, say, "I love this, but Bitcoin, not so sure about." And it's like, all right, I'll take that. And it's like a step in the right direction in my mind.
Yeah, well, we can't control how you think, but we can at least get something in there for you to think
plant
about.
The seed.
Right? We can plant the seed.
Yeah.
All right, well, pivoting a little bit, there's definitely been a lot of talk as the AI revolution got underway a couple of years ago about what this means for Bitcoin directly. How will Bitcoin and AI interact? Is Bitcoin the money for the robots and for AI? I think, that's kind of a big debate that people like to have. What are your thoughts on the integration points of AI and Bitcoin? Where do you see things playing out over the next 5 years, let's say, for these two really powerful tools?
Yeah, I think unless you're paying attention, this may be unintuitive, but I think AI actually leads to further distribution and decentralization of Bitcoin, simply because this drive to build all these data centers is going to push Bitcoin miners off the grid. You're seeing spot prices of, I'm in PJM. I think 2 weeks ago, PJM spot pricing went up to like $350 a kilowatt. Megawatt, which is 35 cents a kilowatt, which is completely unprofitable for a
PJM. Can you distill that down to layman's terms for me?
PJM, it's like the grid system I live in the Northeast.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. What does PJM stand for? PJM. What's the grid system here in the PJM interconnection grid? Not important. Anyway, electricity prices are going up. I think actually that is like the first order effect of AI on Bitcoin in this intersection is with the energy. Like the insatiable demand for energy from these hyperscalers is undeniable. It's obviously become a focal point of the Trump administration to foster, and if you're in the Bitcoin mining industry or in the energy industry, it's very obvious. Like there is a ton of demand for capacity that already exists and expansion of capacity into the future. We're probably going to need to double the size of the grid in the U.S. at least to satiate the demand that currently exists. I think one question is how much of the AI hype right now is hype, and how much of it is actually like real. I think it's undeniable. A lot of it is real, but I think it's also undeniable there is a ton of capital being burnt right now. People are spraying and praying just to place their bets on a wide spectrum of AI companies and applications to make sure they capture some of the upside of this. So I do think there will be a lot of burnt capital, but I do think ultimately it's clear we're going to need more energy capacity, and data centers, particularly running these models, training these models and running the inference on those models, are going to be here in the long run, and they're going to compete with Bitcoin miners. And I think they're going to push a lot of Bitcoin miners off the grid into off-grid operations, smaller, more distributed off-grid, which is good for hash rate geographic distribution, which is good. When it comes to the integration, like literally at the model level, like paying for compute via Bitcoin, I think it's still early days there. I think ultimately it will get there. I think the early experiments I've seen from Cashew specifically, and from what I understand from what Callie's been putting out publicly, is like actually eCash, Bitcoin represented as eCash in these Chaumian mints, may actually be the most viable form of like pay per compute out of all the options, whether that's Bitcoin over the Lightning Network, stable coins over some other cryptocurrency. But I think the way the data transfer of eCash works is actually the most efficient way to do payments for compute. And if the agentic future is really upon us and agents are going to be autonomously completing tasks on the internet, some of which necessitate a financial transaction, I think at the end state, like, it makes sense. It's going to be Bitcoin. I would not be surprised if it's Bitcoin via eCash. However, like in the interim, I do think there's going to be a bunch of crypto AI token nonsense, stablecoin nonsense, and I think there's going to be a lot of sort of experimentation and different ways to pay in the agentic world that have like multiple cryptocurrencies. But I think ultimately, as Parker Lewis likes to say, they will all converge to one. So that's one way.
A couple of years ago, I definitely made the call or the prediction that this bull market, this cycle, will end when, like, the top of it, you can call it, when there is an AI coin that is on the Vegas sphere being advertised there. Like, when that happens, like, that's the end of the cycle. We have reached peak fever.
Yeah, it's going to be a crazy cycle because you have these like converging themes like energy, the debt crisis, Bitcoin, AI. Like it's all chaotic. They're all converging. If you talk to Matt Pines, like the UAP stuff as well. But like I think it's going to get crazy. I think the question in many people's minds, most people's minds, is like how long does it stay crazy? And I don't know if you listen to, I forget if it was All In or Brad Gessner and Bill Gurley's podcast, but a couple of weeks ago, Gavin Baker, who's like an investor, both public markets and private markets, he made a good point. A lot of people are comparing the AI data center build out to the broadband build out of the late 90s and the dot-com boom. And he made a very smart sort of point out on the comparison of the two. A lot of people are saying because in the 90s dot-com bubble, they built out all this broadband. And it was a bunch of waste of capital because the internet literally wasn't ready to push information through all the tunnels that were built yet. There was no consumer applications, no demand for it at that point. And not enough people had adopted the internet, and the internet hadn't matured to the point where you could have all these consumer applications, websites, and sort of e-commerce. It took another 10 to 15 years. But Gavin pointed out, when it comes to the AI data center, like the demand is there already. Like you're seeing companies are recognizing that they can create productivity increases and efficiencies without having to increase their headcount and want to replace net new hires or even people that are already on their payroll with these AI tools that can do things faster and cheaper and sometimes more accurately, or a lot of times more accurately. So that's like an interesting difference where I'm rambling right now, but the point I bring it up is because I think there is a possibility that a lot of this, like most of, particularly with the big players in OpenAI, Anthropic, Meta, Google, like it could be real. Like there could be there's not going to be like a blow up because the demand is just simply too high. It's undeniable that these tools are efficient and productivity increasing, as we've been discussing throughout this whole conversation.
You're going back to the point about energy and the amount of energy that's needed for all of this data processing and just it's an explosion of exponential means of compute that is needed and energy that is needed to feed that compute. And it feels like maybe we have, enough capacity to handle it now, but just seeing the pace at which things are progressing, like unless things get much more efficient in the way that they are, that the compute is pulling energy, or there's an explosion of energy production, it feels like there's some kind of like breaking point there. Like there's some kind of wall that will be hit unless you get a combination of both of those things that happens very quickly. That becomes much more efficient, and that we have a whole lot more energy available.
Yeah, it's gonna be the physical side. It's gonna be the energy. The energy is the bottleneck right now, and it probably will be for the next decade unless there's some crazy.
Like you can't make it if more efficient fast enough or to a great enough degree to offset the energy needs that are going to be.
Well, not only can you make it more efficient, I think Jevons paradox comes into play too. Even if you were to make it more efficient, like you would just see
more usage of it
rise exponentially because you can do more with it. And I think that's certainly the case. And unless there's some miracle at the regulatory level where you clear all the red tape for small modular reactors and the SMR companies are actually able to produce their products at a fast clip. Like outside of that, I find it hard to believe that we're going to be able to expand fast enough to keep up with the demand in the medium term. Hopefully that problem gets solved in the long term, but it's fascinating to think about. It's an exciting time to be alive. But back to the broader question of like, how does AI affect Bitcoin? I think we've seen a Bitcoin Core. I think some, particularly not like people aren't writing lines of code in Bitcoin Core, but I think with fuzz testing, and fuzz testing for anybody who's unaware, it's just you just literally probe the network to find out where there's bugs. Like I'm pretty sure some of the devs have been using AI tools to fuzz test the network quicker and surface any potential bugs in a more efficient way, which is cool to see. Obviously on the business building side, like TFTC, we're a media company, we're using it. Like it makes sense for any person building a Bitcoin business to be using these tools as well, particularly on the engineering side. And I think a ton of companies in our portfolio are really leaning into that. And I think Bitcoin companies are actually probably some of the first that will adopt this because they have Bitcoin as the hurdle rate in their mind at all times. You're starting a company, and you are taking on the opportunity cost of not going and working a high-paying tech job because you think you can start a company and get it profitable and accumulate more Bitcoin in the long run. So all the founders in our portfolio sort of have that mindset, and to have a tool that can make you more efficient and more productive without having to hire more people with cheaper costs, like it's a no-brainer. Like, yes, I'm going to adopt this to build out my product so I can build faster, cheaper, and get to market quicker to get to revenue and profitability. And I think every one of the companies in the portfolio is either using AI on the product development side or building AI products into what they're doing. I think Maple AI is obviously the most obvious expression of that. And you have Tony and Mark's there, our two-man team, who have built this AI product with Maple AI, but they've used AI on the back end to build their AI product. And that two-man team's been able to do a lot with relatively little. And I think that's another way that AI will affect Bitcoin is on the business building side. Bitcoiners, I think, are very open to using this tech because they realize the efficiencies can make them more Bitcoin quicker. And we'll see that on the product development side as well.
Yeah. It's going to be fascinating to see it play out over the next few years. I'm definitely trying to get my hands dirty. As we kind of wrap up here, what practical advice would you have for people who are trying to learn how to use these tools, embracing the tools for their business, for their processes, all of that kind of thing? Any words of caution for people as well as they're thinking about how to incorporate AI into their day-to-day lives?
Number one, like I said, ask the model how to use it and like what to ask it to get the output that you want. Number two, like with opportunity costs, I built the MVP, but I was smart enough to recognize like I do not feel comfortable launching this as production code on GitHub. I do not understand really what's happening. And so from my perspective as a business owner and like all the ways that I'm implementing it, like I'll test it out and get it to a certain point and get confident, like, all right, if there's somebody who is an engineer and well-versed in this particular domain, or cinematography, video production. Like if I can get it to a certain point and be confident that an expert in this domain, if they can learn the tools, they can take it to the next level. So I guess know what you're good at, and know your limitations, and don't, like, particularly when it comes to coding, or particularly when it comes to coding, like, know what you're good at. Like, you don't want to be the guy like vibe coding an app and like doing it in a way that puts user data at risk, or you have an API token exposed in your GitHub page that you're unaware of because you didn't know to look for it. So know your limitations. Try to use it every day. And especially if you're running a business, like, find the people that may not be using the tools yet, but have a certain expertise. It's like, hey, if you keep using these tools and product manage in your particular domain, like, you will extend your productivity and turn it into a superpower. I guess that's my advice. Like, know your limits, play with it, and then if you want to take it to the next level, like, partner with people that are domain experts in the area that you're trying to achieve something.
Cool. Appreciate that. All right. Well, you've been a great partner to Unchained for, many, many years. Really appreciate that. We obviously appreciate the partnership. I know you may have like referral codes to drop and that kind of thing, but tell people how you can, how people can find you, where they can follow your work, where they can see these amazing videos that you've been putting out. Give us the full sign off here.
First of all, use the code TFTC, or go to unchained.com/TFTC for 50% off, or $50 off, not 50%.
There it is.
I'm kidding. Marty Bent on X, Marty at primal.net on Nostr. That's where I'm doing the exclusive vlogs, where I am sort of opening up about the processes to behind. I'm keeping the alpha for the AI processes on Nostr for now. TFTC.io for the website. Subscribe to the newsletter in the top right, and then TFTC.tv for the YouTube, and then TFTC in any of your favorite podcasting apps. And then 1031.xyz to check out what we're up to at 1031. And the companies we're invested in beyond Unchained. It's a really exciting time.
Love it. Thanks for your time. Appreciate the conversation. I will talk to you the next time.
Thank you, Trey.